Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining this our webinar on the Professional Advantage iPOS product. We're going to get started in a few minutes, but we're just waiting on one or two more attendees to join us. So if you just bear with us for 1 second, and then we'll kick off with the full session. Thanks. Okay, we've got quite a lot to get through in the next hour, and I don't want to rush Andrew in his presentation. So rather than wait any longer, we'll get started. As we go through the session today, if you've got any questions at all, please just either enter them in the chat window, or you can just wait to the end and we will have a Q&A session as times allow. So we're going to be looking at the iPOS product around procure to pay, fully integrated into Sun Systems. But I'll let Andrew explain that in a lot more detail and much better than I can. So Andrew, over to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming along today to the session on iPOS. The structure of the session is going to be a brief set of slides, just positioning the iPOS procurement solution, and then I'm going to jump into the actual product and work through a standard purchase to pay transaction processing scenario. So obviously I'll attempt to show all of the features and functions as we go along to the degree that's possible within an hour. So if you do have any questions, as Chris says, please feel free to add those into the chat bar or have an open question session at the end. So I'm Andrew Parsons from Professional Advantage. We're the developers and providers of the iPOS solution. We've been working in the Sun Systems space for about 30 years now, and we're a long-term partner and developer to Infor and the Sun Systems side of things, and also a long-term partner with Kick in delivering solutions in and around the outside of Sun Systems to provide functionality or usability that may not be catered for well within the core solution. Today's obvious subject is our iPOS solution, and this is an end-to-end procure-to-pay tool that allows you to spread purchase requisitioning throughout your organization, allowing your users to make requests for purchase, having these pass through the correct approval and compliance processes, and then on through the order generation and management, goods receipting, and the invoice management stages as well. We produce solutions that work for Sun Systems as a whole, and the great thing about every Professional Advantage solution is that they are deeply integrated to the Sun Systems core ledgers, and this means that they work in a real-time basis. They understand the structures of Sun Systems out of the box. The second they're installed, you can understand the concepts of business units, accounts, analysis codes, suppliers, all of these things that are great about Sun Systems, and it doesn't pass batch information backwards and forwards. It actually does each transaction on a real-time database level basis, as if you're working within Sun Systems, which removes one of the key problems that you see in the procurement process, whereby you have batches that are passed across and they may fail, and you have reconciliation issues at the end of the month. That sort of thing is avoided through full integration and deep validation of information within Sun. We work in a number of different areas, but spend control obviously is what we're looking at here. And the way data works within iPOS and Sun Systems is that it all sits within the Sun Systems database environment. So you don't have to manage separate databases. There's no duplication of records. It works alongside Sun Systems, and data that sits within Sun, within the SQL environment, such as ledgers, all your supplier details, addresses, contact information, P&L accounts, and most importantly, things like analysis dimensions for things like departments, scheme codes, properties, those sort of things are all held within Sun and read directly, so you don't have to duplicate them, and we just pick them up immediately. Whereas within the iPOS data set, sitting in the same database, we manage the procurement based important elements such as items and catalogs, the approval processes and users and access, workflow, all the things you expect to manage around procurement, and they are managed through the iPOS administration console within the solution. So iPOS is designed for Sun. It's version compliant with all current supported versions of Sun Systems. So you're in the Sun Systems version 4 stream or in the version 6 stream. You can use an iPOS environment, and as we move forward, there's always a corresponding release to support new versioning, new functionality, and we do that in conjunction with Infor to ensure that compliance. The solution is administered by yourselves, so it's designed to be simple to administer. Obviously, after the initial implementation, you may have changes you need to make around your day-to-day activities, the workflow, configuration, so that can all be done by your administrators within your environment. It's designed to be simple, and one of the key areas of benefit in the iPOS environment, and indeed with all procurement solutions, of course, is budget management and the control around your spend. So iPOS understands the concepts of Sun Systems budget ledgers, and it works with a full commitment accounting process. So as you pass through the transaction, make a request and generate an order, the system will make a real-time commitment into a commitment ledger within Sun Systems. That is then reversed at the point required by either a goods receipt or an invoice being registered, and an accrual can be posted. It will then automatically reverse that accrual and post the invoice through to Sun for payment management as you go forward. So each of those is done on a granular basis with live control and live journal posting and validation. And the budget checking process includes that commitment and accrual and actual spend. So as you raise requisitions, have those sent for approval, we can show the budget situation, including the actual spend, the committed spend, etc., to give you real-time control of your purchasing processes. Workflow is very strong in iPOS. We have extensive configuration capability in terms of who does what, when and where, how we alert people within the system to activities that they may need to undertake, and controlling what types of transaction require different types of workflow within there, and I'll show that as we go forward. The system also manages the reduction of paperwork, in that you obviously are capturing everything in electronic forms. We have a full audit trail around that and reporting to understand every step in the process. And it will also generate orders and send those out to your suppliers. So orders can be pushed out as an email with an attachment with different document types for different types of order, and that will be sent based on supplier information held in Sun Systems. The other methods for sending orders can be through EDI and the creation of electronic orders that can be passed through a supplier's portal. Or if we wanted to, we can even work with punch out, where a supplier has their own purchasing portal, and we're able to read catalogs from that portal, bring prices, etc., through into iPOS for approval, and then have them sent back as an order through that electronic integration. So we have a number of different ways to implement this, depending on the level you wish to go to and depending on your suppliers. It's an easy to use tool designed for simplicity and personalization. So each user and user group can be set up to have their own view of the world with dashboards that correspond to their role, functionality corresponding to their role, and the ability for individuals and groups to customize the screen and put buttons where they want them, have shortcuts where they need them, and remove anything they don't want as well. So certainly it needs to be a personalized environment to ensure that people can adopt the system easily and use it easily on their day-to-day basis. So that's the sort of overview of the iPOS functionality. We do have a number of different modules associated to iPOS. There are some of these are core and come with your core licensing, which is a named user license. So every user needs to be named within the solution. And that is things such as the standard procure to pay, all of the requisition through to invoicing, part of the core. But then additionally, we have a mobile approval functionality, which is available on a number of smartphones, which allows us to spread approval activities out to people not sitting in front of a computer. They can see all of the activities that they need to do for requisitions and invoices. They can drill to the detail, see what's going on, and make approvals or rejections, etc. That's all available as part of core. We have a scheduler for scheduling the generation of orders, which may be every couple of minutes, or it could be every hour or at the end of the day. And we have a desktop notification tool that you can install for certain users if they wish, where it would pop up on the screen like an Outlook add-in to say that they have actions to take if they are not sitting in their email, where they may get alerts, or sitting in mobile approvals, or indeed in iPOS. So we can spread those out. The system includes supplier drawdown contract capability, and this is not contract management in terms of the negotiation, the sign-off, the paperwork, that sort of thing. What it's about is the representation of a supplier contract into the procurement solution so that we can draw down from agreed spend for a supplier for maybe particular items or for a certain spend over a certain period of time. And multiple orders passing through the system can draw down from that contract, and then the contract owners can be alerted on drawdown, the expiry date approach, that sort of thing, and manage the approval of that spend in the system and ensure that we don't overspend with particular suppliers or particular contracts. So that's something that's core. It can be utilized if it's appropriate for your business. We have a number of optional modules. The importer allows us to do bulk changes to configuration. It's very good for sort of changing approval matrices and things like that. iPOS Excel allows for an add-in into the Excel environment, meaning you can upload bulk requisitions, bulk invoices if you wish to, from Excel into the system where maybe you do things on a regular basis or you have a large volume and you don't want to type them in, and also to extract data into Excel for reporting purposes if you want lists of invoices, orders, requisitions, etc. Similar to the M4 Q&A environment for bringing that data out. Other solutions around it, PA Streams gives advanced integration if you want to talk to other systems on a complex fashion, although iPOS as a core does have a XML interface, meaning we can link to other systems such as housing solutions, works order solutions, things like this if needed without going to that advanced integration capability. A service we've introduced recently is the intelligent invoice capture functionality. This allows for an improved workflow around the management of purchase invoices. We can send invoices to an email address where the system will then take any attachments, which would be an attached invoice, scan it using an AI algorithm, and then pass that invoice back into iPOS with data completed from the invoice document for your approval, for matching to orders, etc., and or for amendment or additional information to be added. So this can speed up the entry and capture of the invoice process. Just to run very quickly through some of the functionality, but I'll show you this as we go along. Obviously, requisitions could be a good place to start. Users can choose from the web environment in catalogs, items of services or actual items, physical items that have been set up within the system. These could be associated to particular suppliers or approved supplier lists. We can also have costs for a particular item against a particular supplier, depending on the degree of procurement management you would go through in your organization. If you wish to start pushing for certain suppliers to be used or certain contracts to be used, that can be all managed, or it could be very open. You can have items and catalogs that are really P&L level, where you may choose something and then put a description and value in yourself as a request. We can also have templates for repeat orders like stationary order, and all of those requisitions can then be passed through a budget check. So we can block or warn around budget checking, or maybe pass that on to an approver if that's what you wanted to do. Once you've sent requisitions through the system, the next step would be approval, and this can be up to 6 layers within iPOS from the point at which it enters the approval matrix, and this could be based on item category, maybe combinations of analysis codes and departments, P&L association to the item, user group or management structures, and value, of course. So each of these levels is a sequential approval. It could be a group of users or an individual user, and all of them will receive alerts, on-screen alerts, to-do lists in the system, etc., to ensure that that's done. And when they take action against it, it would then escalate it to the next level of approval if required, or potentially it could be passing it back to the originator to say, please, can you fill some extra information in, manage a rejection, that sort of thing. All of this, of course, being audited within the system. With approvals, we can do header level, meaning the total value of a requisition could be approved, or it could be individual lines, potentially coded in different ways to different departments. They may all need to be approved, or indeed both. We can have total value and the line level approval occurring, meaning that it will pass to the order point. So approvals is a very powerful set of workflow within the system, highly configurable. When you've approved your requisitions, the system will generate orders for you automatically, although you can do that manually as well if you go down that process, but generally it will be an automatic dispatch, and that would send them out to the supplier. We can use different document formats depending on the type of requirements on an order. We can recall them, we can resend them, and we can amend them. We can add lines. All of that is managed nicely by the system, and it would send amendment orders, cancellation orders, etc., out to the supplier. Can't guarantee what they would do, of course, but we manage that communication. And then we also at that point would, of course, post our hard commitment to the ledger if that's what you wanted the system to do. Once you've gone through ordering, there is an optional goods receipt stage in iPOS. This means that obviously you can receive goods and ensure that a service or goods have been delivered correctly with the correct volume, the correct number of hours, whatever it may be, maybe by value or by quantity. That could be optional for some items, compulsory for other types, maybe capital expenditure assets. They may need physical receipt, maybe others do not, and it could go straight to invoice. That can be managed. But of course, the goods receipting function means that you do have much better control and understanding from a financial point of view and from a sort of a logical understanding of delivery than you would without it. However, it does mean users have to enter goods receipts. So it is an entirely optional stage depending on how you wanted to set that up within your business. For goods receipting, we can have tolerances. So you can over receipt, under receipt. Maybe you have received more or less than you expected, more value than you expected. That can then push invoices for approval if they're over value. If you force through a bigger receipt, maybe potentially than the order suggested, perhaps you need an invoice approval. So we can step that through the workflow. And the same would go for invoices. So if you enter an invoice that's above or under value, then we can force approval steps that need to occur. And in the background, manage the reversal of the commitment, the posting of the accrual at the goods receipt or the invoice stage to ensure that the financials reflect that and the budget checking is correct. So all of that is managed nicely within iPOS. Invoice entry occurs within the web, so your AP team entering invoices would naturally access the iPOS interface to enter any of your invoices. And in here, we can enter invoices that need to be matched to an order, or invoices that do not have an order and just need to be passed through, overhead type invoices that may require more coding. Where they are matched to an order, we inherit all of our coding from there, all the analysis coding, all the account coding, so there's little to do against an invoice with an order. However, we could have optional tolerances around over delivery, under delivery, the addition of maybe goods delivery charges, things like that weren't on the order can all nicely be managed. Capturing an invoice means we capture the invoice numbers. We can also add attachments for a document. If you actually have the invoice document there, we can attach it in. And we can add notes and things like this as needed. Of course, if you're using invoice capture, that would then be creating those invoices in the system for you if you use that IIC service that we provide. So you can then see a visual of the invoice that's being scanned, see the data that's been scraped from that using our AI algorithm, and then edit and amend those through the work queue. So there's a way of improving that process for you. Finally, leading to approval, again, number of steps, up to 6 layers. And we can do things around that approval, such as withholding invoices from payment, putting on any workflow alerts around when an invoice arrives and notifying the originator that the invoice has come through. So all of that workflow absolutely built into the system, configurable. iPOS has been around since about the year 2000, so 20 odd years. It has a great deal of feedback over that time from our client base, and we built a lot of configurable capability into the solution to provide for the different scenarios people come up with. So I'm going to jump out of here and move on to the actual software and show you how this could work in reality and run through a brief process within the iPOS environment. So you should now be able to see my web interface. I'm running this in Google Chrome. It can also be used in Microsoft-based web browsers. And when you log into the system, you're logging in as a named user. So at the moment, I'm logged in as a user called Ben Baker, and we can see if I just hover over our profile here, that Ben is set up within the system. He is a user that needs to potentially raise requisitions, and in great demo form, I've just realized it's been sitting there for a while and has timed out, which is obviously a good security feature around that. So I'll just log back in as Ben. But Ben is a user who is defined in the solution purely to really raise requisitions, to raise goods receipts potentially, but does not need to access things like invoice entry or any more complex information. And when Ben logs in, we can log in with a named user, or we could use a pass-through security where it will pick up my Windows IDs and log me into the system when I access the URL. So we don't have to log in every time. Ben has a home page, so you can see here that I've landed into the shopping cart functionality, which gives me access to a number of different catalogs and queues within here. And this is up to the user. So the user can define where they wish to land when they log in. It could be you want a dashboard. Perhaps if you're an approval user, you want to land into invoice approval or requisition approval. So depending on your role, that can be defined for you by the administrator, or an individual can make choices as to where they land and set that up so that it will use that going forward, which gives you great personalization. So along the top, just to orient ourselves, we have a number of quick action buttons, and these give access to functionality within the system that has been given by the administrator to this role Ben is fulfilling. So we can certainly raise new requisitions, search previous, view a list of them, maybe use the shopping cart or load an order onto a receipt. They're very good standard buttons that Ben may wish to use. So they've been added to that quick action bar. However, we do have a main functional menu over on the left from our hamburger here, which gives access to all functionality that Ben may wish to use and has access to. So he has a number of goods receipting functions here, requisition functions, contracts, etc. But we don't want to need using those all the time. So we leave those hidden over to the side, and only those that you put onto the top bar are the ones you wish to use all the time. But Ben can make that decision, and that's the great thing about the way this interface works. So if we look here, we have a customize function, and this goes throughout all the areas of iPOS. If I look at goods receipting, there's an area for searching goods receipts. Perhaps Ben would like that as a button on my top bar. So if I save this, it would immediately reorient the screen and add that button to the top bar for me. And that then is kept going forward. So this is how we can sort of personalize this function and do it and make it easy for the user. So to raise a requisition, very simple request. I'm going to use things from a catalog, and of course the catalogs can be defined by you within the system. And then different catalogs can be made available to different user groups. So it could be I only have a list of stationery or IT. Maybe someone else has a broader purchasing capability, and all of that can be administered based on the group profiles. And when we choose a catalog, we see a list of the items that have been set up within here. And they could be items at a very top level, such as this one, appliance servicing, very broad, and we may want to just leave it at that, and it links in the background to the correct P&L accounts. Maybe it has some defaulting around tax analysis, that sort of thing, which the end user does not need to necessarily understand. Or we could have very detailed items that actually are set up with a value and potentially a supplier. So you can see here we've got some default suppliers set up for these items, meaning that when you choose the item, it would naturally use that supplier. But maybe you have open selection of suppliers. Maybe it's an approved list of suppliers. Those can be defined. So to create one of these items, that's done by the administrator in the background. They're totally open. It's up to you how you do it. We can add images into our items if you want to have a visual graphic around particular items. Entirely up to you what images you use, but it depends on the style and how you want to use that. So I typically start with having no images turned on, and that's up to the user when they do that. I can then add items here to my shopping cart. So we have a little cart symbol at the top. If I look at my quantity, maybe this appliance servicing from Aurora Europe, that's defined for me, and I have a set price for it here. Maybe you wouldn't, but you could do that. And I'm going to add one of those to my cart. So that immediately updates the shopping cart over the right. I've got one sitting in my cart. I then may want to purchase something else. So if I go to my stationery catalog here, I could then decide, okay, let's think about maybe some adhesive and tapes from Lyrico. I don't have a price assigned. That's just in the background, but I can add a price to my requisition if I know roughly what I want and what I'm going to be doing there. So I'm going to add one of those to the cart as well. So I've added two different items from two different suppliers. And this is key to the way iPOS works from a requisitioning sense, because requisitions can have multiple items on one requisition that are from different suppliers. Potentially, I'm doing all of my purchasing in one go. I want one requisition sent through. Maybe I'm doing a project such as refurbishing a building or a room or something like this, and I need things from different suppliers to do it, but I want to approve the requisition value for that project and send it through that way. So iPOS allows for this, and then in the background, we'll create the right orders to the right suppliers and keep a history and an audit trail linked to the originating requisition. So this is sort of a common usage nowadays in the procurement solution area. Once I've chosen all my items, I could have gone and used a template. This could be a predefined set of items, such as a stationery order, some such. I could have gone and looked for individual items. We have lots of ways of doing that. Maybe I want to categorize them into item categories, not within a catalog, and just see all items in a certain category. We can achieve that using an analysis structure in the background. But from a user sense, I've chosen my couple of items here. I can go and create that directly if I wish as a requisition. Very simple, easy to do. In this case, I'm going to actually look at my card. Maybe I perhaps want to remove something or check that I've added things that I need into that cart. And you can see I have the two lines here. It's picked up my supplier ID. Sorry, I should turn that off. Picked up my supplier ID here and the supplier name, and this is coming from Sun Systems. So all supplier information sits within Sun and is not dealt with within iPOS. We create the supplier ID and ensure that everything is set up nicely so that iPOS can actually see the item in the background and draw that supplier information through. So we're only managing it in one place and not having to do it in multiple places in order to duplicate data. So this requisition here, we're going to code. So if we look up here, we've got cost allocation. Users need to be looking at simplicity. They don't want to have to code things which are obvious within the system. So Ben as a user may sit within a certain department, certain scheme, certain cost center. Those things can be assumed, and therefore we can pre-code the requisition with that information at this point. So we've assigned Ben this grouping here, cost allocation called ECB, and that is his coding structure. So if I have a look at that, you'll see that in the background, you may have a number of analysis codes, your ledger analysis dimensions sitting within Sun. In my case, I have region, I have cost center scheme, etc. And Ben is associated to those already. So anything I put through without changing anything immediately gets that coding set up for me, which is great. Reduces user issues, but it also means we can pass information for approval correctly because the coding structure is already there. We can pass things for budget checking correctly because the coding structure is already there. And of course, the item is dictating P&L account as well. So that could help us with our approval routing or indeed our underlying budget checking. So all of that is nicely done. But of course, you may have situations where something can't be pre-populated. Maybe you want to change a project code or some such, which is based on the requisition you're doing. So here we can actually go in for all the lines on the requisition or indeed code them separately and change any of these codes. And these use the Sun Systems code. So anything available to me as a user, as a code in Sun, I can use. If you created a new code in Sun, that would immediately come into this list, but we can also manage those that are available for different users. So maybe Ben could only pick from certain cost centers or certain codes, and that can be configured in iPOS. But a very simple way of coding my whole requisition if I need to with that, and I don't want to change it, so I just cancel my change there. So if I'm happy with my coding here, I can actually create and submit the requisition. So that would then create a requisition sitting in the background. And I'm going to create it, but not submit it at this stage. So if I go create, this allows me then a budget check. So when I create the requisition, it goes off, uses my codes, my values, etc., to check against the Sun budget, check against my expenditure so far, and come back saying, hey, I'm actually over budget here for my appliance servicing. Now, this could be a warning you want applied for the approver, but not for the requester. That's perfectly fine. But it could also be a block or just a warning, depending on your process. So in this case, I can override it. It's just a warning, but it could have been a block and it prevents me from going any further there. So I now have my requisition. Now, from an end user sense, I could have just submitted this in one go, so I don't have to be looking at this, but I wanted to show you that on the line, the system works out which person is next approver for these. So In the background, it's worked out that Nelson Norton, iPOS admin, to approve this appliance servicing, and my iPOS admin user for adhesives and tapes. So it's splitting the lines up, sending them for approval to different groupings, different routings based on value. And the reason it's going to iPOS admin here, which is my administrator, is actually there's no value. So this is really not a very valid line. It may need extra coding. Perhaps we want 0 value lines to go to someone to fill in that detail for certain item types. That can be done. Say an IT expenditure may need to go to the IT department. So we can route that very cleverly in there. The one that's over budget is in red, very obvious to me. But I'm going to open this line up and just add some value because I want it to go to the correct person for approval. So when we look at a line here, you can see that it's got a basic default description, adhesive and tapes. I can add to that. Unlimited description can be typed in for any particular line if I wanted to. We can also, if we wish, go and change the unit value, which in this case, I'm going to add a unit value. I'm going to put 450 pounds, sorry, in. And you'll see that it's calculated tax, and it does that automatically based on the tax coding. And the tax coding is not something that is interested in. Maybe he doesn't really know what tax coding to use, what rate is going to be applied. So the system can default tax coding based on the item, based on the supplier, based on the user group, various different criteria there, so that the user doesn't have to think about that. Something the AP team may need to look at when it gets to the invoicing stage. But the tax coding comes from Sun Systems, and it uses the tax rates associated to that coding in the background, again, automatically populated from Sun. We can raise multi-currency requisitions if we wish to, uses the currency rates from Sun Systems, although many people on this session potentially would just be single currency. And of course, up here, we can see the supplier. So this has been defaulted, as I did from the catalog. But when I hit the drop down, we can see that I have only one supplier here. It's just default supplier. But I could have a list of approved suppliers, or maybe have access to all addresses if I wanted to, and the system has been set up that way. So we can manage that function to provide the ability to move around. We can have a look at the P&L account structure. We can add comments and justifications. So if I wanted to say to the approver why I need this, I could say we ran out of tape and we need some more, something like that. If I save it, it then adds that to the history of the requisition. It's saved as part of the audit trail. Everyone can see that who looks at the history. And of course, I or any other user through the process can add as many extra justifications and comments to this as we like, including attachments. So if I wanted to send and associate maybe a quotation or a letter or something associated to it in the background, I can do that and attach it. And of course, add many other notes at different stages, and indeed notes and attachments that I want to send to the supplier as well, and they will go out as an associated attachment on the order email when that was dispatched to my supplier. So requisition can be, very detailed. We can fill in lots of information here if needed. We can add in asset codes from the Sun System Asset Register to associate it. We can have lots of extra fields that we can rename and use in different ways. But the key is simplicity. So if you wish, you can actually not have any of this needed by the user. We can set the default coding. We can have our requisition with the values associated from the beginning and not have to go into this screen at all. So if I now submit that requisition on for approval, that will go into the approval process. And as far as Ben's concerned, that's now waiting to move forward. Now, when I do that, this has taken me to a home screen. So we have a dashboard capability within iPOS, and this can be set up for different users with different widgets. We have about sort of 8 different widgets that we can use out of the box, but we can also use different things and configure different things as part of the development for deployment if you wish to. However, these are very useful. So we have things such as a to-do list, we have a news feed, we have things like requisition line by status. We've got quite a lot pending approval there, some returned to me by the user, and I can drill into any of these grids and graphs. And this one is aged documents. So I've got requisitions pending approval, quite a big value there, 90 days plus. What's going on? So if I actually double click on this, I can drill in here down to a list of those individual requisitions. I can have a look at the pending approval function. I can see all of the coding data, the supplier name, what's going on, who's actually doing it, and indeed go and open the requisition as well. So this may not be relevant to Ben, perhaps, but it could be relevant to an approver. It could be relevant to a manager. So these options within the dashboard are configurable, and we can actually, as a user, if we've been given access, go and administer what blocks are used in different areas. So these are all of our widgets. We can decide where they're going to be, how many columns they take up, and use them in that way if we've been given access to them. So that's sort of quite a useful user-driven functionality to deploy these dashboards and use them in a good way. And we'll have a look at the iPOS Administrator's dashboard in a minute. They have more data in there currently. So I've raised a requisition. What I need to do is now log out as Ben because he's finished doing what he'd like to do. But just as I go there, we do offer a number of different themes. So this, I'm using the glass theme, but we can actually change some of the look and feel a little bit if we wish to. So if I really liked something particular here, I could just use it as a user. So Mulberry, for example, has some interesting colors. I wouldn't use it, but it's there. I can jump in and see it changes the shape of the buttons. It changes the way grids look, things like that, coloring around the system. So there's a number of options for a user in setting up and using iPOS. So I've now logged out, and I'm going to log back in as my first approver, which would be the iPOS administrator. In this case, just set up the approver. And when I log in as the iPOS administrator, being a different role, you'll see that they're landing into this other dashboard. They've got more information here. We've got a budget analysis where we can see actuals to commitment to date, that sort of thing, if I'm interested in that sort of stuff. Orders by item, unreceipted order lines. We've got various extra bits in the dashboard that user's using. But additionally, lots of extra functions being added to the top bar, purely because that user uses them a lot. So to approve a requisition, I could have landed directly into the approve requisition screen because that's something I do regularly, and that may be the position I wish to be in. But I could have looked at my to-do list. So to see this screen here, I've got some approvals to make. But if I have a look at the to-do list, I can see here a breakdown of all actions I may have to do. Requisition lines awaiting my approval, receipts waiting to be submitted, orders waiting to be receipted. I can see the value, I can see the quantity, and I can drill into them by different Sun Systems business units as well. So we have quite an extensive to-do list capability in there that any user can use depending on their role within the system. Another thing we could have done is seen an email. So if we just go and have a look here, this is a typical email alert that could have come from iPOS, just showing you that Ben has sent something for approval, some appliance servicing, certain value. And we have a link that can then follow directly back into the system, log you in, take you to the right approval screen. So that's a typical approval link within iPOS, or I could have used my iPOS mobile approval functionality to have a look at that data. Now within here, as an approver, I can see that Ben has raised these requisitions. We can see certain value. We can also see the next approver who's sitting on that. And I can approve it from here. I can also approve individual ones. I can use the task option to approve a bulk selection or reject a bulk selection, etc. So this Thompson's one, maybe I want to open it up, and I can open up the requisition and see all the detail, but perhaps I can see everything I need here. So I've actually got all of my actuals, accruals to date, my department coding, and each of these columns in the grid, I can move them around. So if I prefer to have a particular field in a certain place, I can do that. I can sort up and down just by clicking on the column. I can also use filters such as contains, doesn't contain, across different grids to find information. And this goes for all grids within the iPOS environment. I can also group. So if I wanted to see everything by the next approver, drag that up here into the group, let go, and then I get a grouping by next approver. And this is a little bit like a pivot table. So maybe let's do it by supplier as well. So now I have next approver being iPOS admin, and then under that, we've got broken down by supplier. So these grids are really useful, and we can, of course, export that to Excel, including filters, without filters, and that applies to any grid within the iPOS environment if we wanted to do that. So for this one here, I'm actually not going to approve it. Perhaps what I want to do for that is to reject it. I've decided that's not something I want to allow. I have a compulsory reason. I can say, perhaps no budget, perhaps that's just my reason, sorry. And that would send the alert and an email notification back to Ben to say, hey, that can't be done, sorry, and it stays in his list. But another one here, perhaps I actually want it to continue, but I'm going to return it and say, could we add more description or some such? So we can actually shuttle these things backwards and forwards in the workflow, notify previous approvers, etc., to ensure that the right thing happens. And that could be resubmitted with the same ticket number. So I've gone through those approvals that I wanted to do within there. Of course, I could view requisitions with the view requisition function. This gives me a broad access to all requisitions sitting in there, depending on my access, depending on my data access as well. And we can then ensure that everything's happening correctly. I could go and view what's going on, who's sitting on approvals, things like this, if needed. And if I'm a user, I could jump into different business units. So this one, I'm sitting currently in the PK1 business unit. I'm going to jump into my HOU business unit. This would then give me approvals that maybe sit in another business unit. Now, I could have done this from my to-do list, but just to show it's entirely separate. So if I now drag these down, you'll see that I now have some approvals sitting here, which are the ones that I just raised, which have come from Ben, because that was the business unit I raised in. So iPOS is structured by business unit within Sun Systems. So I've got a couple here sitting ready to approval, some appliance servicing. I'm going to approve that one, pass that on for £4, and then potentially that could go on to the next approver. But I could do all of this in one go. I could do it in bulk, depending on how I want that to do it. So I'm just going to pass them all through very simply and approve them. Very simple process. So it could be that this is multi-level. So if I log out of iPOS here, and I'm sorry to be jumping in and out as different users, of course, usually you wouldn't be doing that. You would just be doing the things that you need to do, and you wouldn't be seeing different users' roles, but I need to show you that from a demonstration sense. So if I log in as Rita, in this case, Rita potentially is the next level of approval sitting here on some of these things. So you can see I've got a couple of different approvers here. So Rita is going to approve those two Lyrico ones that I just raised. So that's how you step through the approval within here. Once you've done that, the system is in a position then to generate orders. So once the approval is complete, it will occur automatically. It would send orders out every couple of minutes or at the end of the day, depending on your choice, and the order gets generated and dispatched. Now, for this particular demonstration, I'm not using the automated order generation. I've left it as a manual step, so I can show you what it does when we actually do that as a user. So if I log back in as someone who has the rights to generate orders within the system, we can actually go to the generate orders function. This could be something you wish to do within your organization. Perhaps someone manages the orders, has a look at all approved requisitions and says, yeah, let's go, let's send these orders. But these are all waiting order generation because they've been approved. So I'm going to generate that one, and it will create an order number. So iPOS controls the order number, dispatches it out, and we can see it's created this order for Lyrico 365. Now that's done, it's been dispatched, it's been sent by email, and a commitment has been posted into the Sun Systems ledger. So if I have a look at that order, 365, you'll see that it looks rather like a requisition, because that's in effect what it is. It's a fully approved requisition. And the only difference is we can see it's not receipted, it's not invoiced, so it's just sitting there ready to go. Now, that could be something optional, receipting. Maybe it's needed, maybe it's not, but definitely invoicing is going to be needed. On the order, we can see any attachments. So if I open up that, we can see the couple of notes that I put in there, but we could also see any attached documentation that were associated to it as well. I could open up the line, and I can also drill back to the requisition. So if I'm interested in seeing where that came from, I have the option to drill back at any stage to the requisition. From an invoice, I could drill to a receipt, to an order, to a requisition. So we have that full linked audit trail within here. But more interestingly, we can actually have a look at things such as the line status. So if I open this up, this shows us a bit about what's happening in Sun Systems. We can see that for that particular order number, the system has generated a journal in Sun, journal number 1434, and that is my commitment journal that's been posted to the Sun Systems ledger. And as we go through the process, you will see that the receipt could generate an accrual journal and reverse that order journal. Then the invoice could reverse the accrual, and that goes all the way along to the payment marker. So we can see in here the actual payment reference that's used when the invoice is paid within Sun Systems and the date of that. So we know when it's happened. So the iPOS user can see full visibility of the completion of the payment process within the system, which is really useful. It saves all those calls to the AP department to say, has this invoice been processed? What's going on? The supplier is chasing me, these sort of things. So that order is done. Now we can also view the actual audit trail of what's going on with this. And this again applies at all stages. So we can build up in the background everything that happens to a transaction. Ben made a request. He sent it for approval. He amended it. It was approved by iPOS admin and Rita Rutherford, and then it came to the purchase order. So this is all date timestamp, full auditable trail within the system, and that goes for every transaction, which of course is important in the processing. So to process this order, the next step will be a goods receipt, potentially. Could be optional, but it would be useful. And you can see we have order number 365. So to raise a goods receipt, Ben could potentially be the person to do that because he was the person who raised the requisition. He's going to be saying when the thing he requested arrives or when the service has been delivered. But it could be sort of centralized option if it was a warehouse or something like that. And Ben coming back in here, you can see that I really don't particularly like this mulberry theme, so I'm going to just jump back to my glass theme, which I prefer as a user, totally optional. Ben has an option here to raise a goods receipt for an order. We can say load receipt order onto receipt. So if I know the order number, I can just type this in here and flip my order into a goods receipt. Very, very simply, easy to do, and creates it without any trouble. However, you may not know your order number always. You know, that's not purely practical. If a service was delivered, someone came and did something for you, they may not know the order number when you say that's done. So another way of doing that would be to go and search for receipts and find all outstanding orders that need goods receipt, maybe lines available by potentially supplier information or who raised it or the delivery address or whatever. And this would then give me a list of all of those lines that are available, and I can find the one that's relevant. So when I look at my list here, adhesive and tapes from Lyrico, 365 is the order number, that's the one. I've just received that. That's great. I can click that line or multiple lines, and I can add multiple order receipts to one receipt. So I could receipt multiple orders in one receipt if I wish, and it holds all those multi-links there. But I'm going to create the receipt. So that's going to create the header. I can then check the information is correct, fill in any delivery references or anything that may be relevant, and we can add fields for that sort of thing. And then down here, if everything was receipted to the order value or quantity in this case, I could just say go and I'm done. Very simple to raise a goods receipt. But I could also split it, draw down from the order, receipt partially, over receipt if I wish to, beyond the order, forcing approval down the road for the invoice. So we can manage those receipting, split, drawdown type situations. In this case, though, I'm just going to say go, process this, and submit for invoicing. So it's very simple to raise a receipt if I wish within the system when I pass this through for order 365. Once I've done that, final step in the process would be to invoice this particular document. So the invoicing of this could be to just flip the order into the invoice, or it could be to search for it, or maybe it's an invoice that's come in that doesn't actually have any order associated to it. So if I'm a user here, you can see that this user does not have access to invoicing. So you would be an AP user within the system who potentially would have that access. So if I log out of here, and I'll log back in as the administrator again, who does have that access in this case, but this will be an AP user. They could be responsible for invoicing. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. If I have an invoice and I want to manually enter it, potentially it doesn't have an order or I don't know the order number, I can just do that by going new invoice and raising it directly in the system. So if I go and have a look at my side menu here, invoices, in this case, I could go new invoice or new credit note, and this gives me an invoice entry form. So I'm sitting there, I have the invoice that's been sent to me, and I'm just going to fill in the information. This is your manual processing of that invoice. And of course, we have some compulsory fields. So supplier, I could say, okay, this is a to Z supplies invoice. It's picking up the detail from Sun Systems there. If you have bank details for that supplier in Sun Systems, we can see the bank details. So this is good if the invoice has the bank details for payment on there. I can check that we hold the right detail and ensure that the right one is being used and approve it if needed. I capture my invoice number, INV, whatever, and that's compulsory, and we have duplicate invoice number checking. I could put in my value, maybe it's 120 total, the date, currency, receive date, things like this, add some more comments to the system if I want, and then I could go and add an invoice line, and the invoice line really is all the things you would expect. So maybe a description, an item code, unit of measure, I can say the quantity, the value, the tax coding, all of this stuff is totally codable in here, and I can choose my P&L account for a line. I can choose my analysis codes for a line. So all of this can be coded in. However, if you're using order basis, that is even more simple because you know the order number and you just want to create that order number within the system. So if I go in here and go to invoicing, I could actually say load order onto invoice because the invoice number potentially, sorry, the order number is potentially on my invoice. I can type in 365 and flip the fully receipted order directly onto the invoice, and it from that order in the background. The only things I may then need potentially is going to be my invoice number. Obviously that's new. Potentially if I want to receipt some of these lines here, I could do that, and then that would immediately populate the value correctly for me, and I'm ready to go. But I could add a document attachment. So potentially that's my invoice document that's come in. Maybe I've got some extra header fields and things I need to populate potentially, so we can rename these fields and use them for different things, and they can go through to the Sun Systems environment. So flipping an invoice, certainly the easiest way to do it. And when we submit the detail, this then passes it on for approval through the same sort of approval links as before. And only at the point of approval does the invoice get posted to Sun, the accrual reversed, or potentially the invoice could be posted with a withhold marker, that sort of thing based on the approval function. So standard workflow, easy to do. Final thing I will mention there, though, is that if you're using the invoice capture service, that is an easier way to do this. And what happens when you use invoice capture is that the service picks up invoices that have been emailed to an address that is associated to your environment. It will then take the invoice attachment, scrape the data using an algorithm, which means that it looks for contextual information. You don't need to have templates. It doesn't have to have a template for each supplier to understand the data. It's pretty good at doing that. It's seen lots of invoices over time, and it's an algorithm that improves with AI over time. And that then gives us the ability to have quite high accuracy in the way we pick up invoices and scrape them. And the result of that is that when we go to invoice capture, it will present to us in the system a list of invoices that are being scanned, scraped, and presented to you. So this will be a to-do list for you. Open one of these, we will see that it's populated data from the invoice in the best way possible. It scraped certain information here. We identified the supplier code to use in Sun based on the VAT number that's picked up from the invoice in the background. And that's held in Sun Systems associated to the supplier. We then can pick up detail lines where feasible. So if it's a good, well-structured invoice with one grid, etc., we can easily do those lines. And that will populate the line detail as well and use some default tax coding around it. So all of this data reduces the entry that you need to make. And all you need to do is then fill in anything that isn't captured that you need to include in your coding, submit it and send it on for processing. And this, of course, includes the image that has come through from the capture. So invoice capture, IIC and iPOS, really good extra service that you can take on if you're interested in automating your AP functionality. iPOS, of course, has lots of reporting functionality, searching functionality. So the search bars here allow us to fill in criteria, return grids, play and manipulate with those grids in the background, and then export them if needed. So everybody has access to this sort of multi-search criteria. And if you are users that have access to reporting, we can provide a list of, I think, about 30 standard reports for PDF listing reports that come through with iPOS doing different things for different users. And you can design, of course, extras as well. So there's PDF type reports the system can produce. So that, I think, is sort of the demonstration side of this. Obviously, I haven't showed you all functionality. I haven't talked about all of the different configuration options you can have, but that's a pretty standard workflow. I think what's important to bear in mind is all of this can be customized. So looking at the function I've shown you, there's a lot there. So not to be overwhelmed by that. As a user, you only see what you need to use. And if that means you're a requisitioner and all you want to do is to come in and have a look at the catalog, this could be your homepage when we come in, where we were before, looking at our catalog. I could come in, I can see an item I'm interested in. Potentially it's freight charges, potentially it's down here, repairs and maintenance. I can add that to my cart. And then from there, I can just go create accept all my details if that's feasible, and then go, okay, and that's all I need to do. So simplicity for end users can be achieved. We don't need all these buttons, we don't need the cataloging. But then for the users that need it, the AP team, the ordering team, we can do a lot more, and we can show a lot more if appropriate. So that's iPOS. So I think at this stage, I'll hand back to Chris for a second, and we'll have a look and see if there's any questions you may have. Please do feel free to type anything you wish into the chat bar now, and we'll attempt to answer any of those questions as needed.
Excellent. Andrew, thank you very much for that. I know there is so much to see in iPOS, and there's many levels of demos you can do, but I think in the time we had, a very comprehensive overview of the system, simple to use, fully integrated into Sun, and taking the, from the point of manual order processing right through to that automation and invoice capture. Very comprehensive. There are a few questions that have popped up in there. I'll just run through them with you. From an approvals viewpoint, if all someone's going to do is approve invoices, is there an app they can use?
Yes, so there are a couple of ways that we can manage that within the system. First up, if the only thing they are is an approver for invoices, we can set up the system so that they have access to approve invoices on this top bar, nothing but that. So we could go in here and say, right, let's go to the customization function, remove everything from that top bar but the approve invoices function, and they would come in and land into this screen. So that's the first thing. The only thing they see in the screen when they come in is the approve invoices function and the ability to drill into it. Secondly, we have the mobile approval application on iPhones, on Android devices, which is a web-based app that allows for authentication and then the alerting and visibility of invoices for approval. So that would just be invoices if that's what that role was for, but it could also be for requisitions as well. We then have to-do lists and email alerting as well.
Brilliant. Another question about licensing. Are the licenses concurrent licenses or named users?
So iPOS, similar to most web applications, is a named user license. So if you're a person who will be going into the web to raise requisitions, to manage orders, to do whatever, they would all be a single license for that user. So you can move licenses around between individuals. So if you have 20 individuals, 100 individuals, they all have licenses and they are named users associated to that license. But then as people move on or change roles, we can reassign those licenses. So it's just to do with the total volume of users who are touching the system at any one time.
Brilliant. Okay, let me check again here. Okay, one more. Yep, the one question has just come in. Interesting. Hot topic, this one. Does this work with the new Sun Systems Cloud?
Okay, so that is a very good question and a hot topic as well. So we are, as I mentioned at the beginning, a long-term development partner with Infor. We are working with them to ensure that we can obviously support the cloud environment as we go forward. And as part of that, with the new multi-tenant cloud, which has been released relatively recently, just very recently, last week or so, they are bringing in an extensive set of APIs that are designed to allow for much deeper integration, such as the iPOS requirement requires. We've been working with them in the background on developing that API interface and to ensure that the right APIs are actually there to ensure continued integration at the level required for iPOS functionality, because one of the benefits of iPOS is this deep integration level. So just passing journals into the SSC environment, for example, is not necessarily going to achieve everything you want from an iPOS environment. So now we have that release, it's out, and we have a development relationship to achieve that. The next step for us is to wire our API up to that. And we've already done all the work in the background to ensure that that's ready to go. And it will be available from our cloud or through the Click hosted environment. And that should be available in the new year. So we're looking at work that will be achieved in sort of January, February. So I would say for full cloud support in the MT environment, you're probably looking at Q1 next year, but it will be coming in the near future.
Excellent, thanks, Andrew. I think that's key for all of the existing Sun users on this call today. Infor have released the first Sun System Cloud multi-tenant. It was last week. We think, and well, we predict over the next 18 months, there'll be a lot of movement to that. So if you are interested in Sun System Cloud, and then moving on to iPOS Cloud and other solutions, pick up the phone, give us a call now. It's never too early to start talking about these things. So we're all ready for that. There's no additional questions popped up. So if everyone is okay, we're finished with that. Don't think there's anything else we can add. So if you want information about iPOS, if you want us to quote or even arrange a longer site demo for yourselves, just either contact myself, Chris Oglesby, or your account manager, Paul Sutherland, and we'll be delighted to supply quotes and more demonstration facilities. This session was recorded, so if you want to see that, we can make that available on request. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Andrew, for your excellent presentation again. Enjoy the rest of your day, and looking forward to a lovely weekend.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye for now.